G'day all, welcome back to the G-Man Show. Today, we're talking through a video called What is Robo Debt by a channel called Knights in Shining Llama. So please go and support his video. You can find a link in the video description. Let's jump in.
In 2021, the federal court approved the largest class action settlement in Australian history, worth over $1.8 billion. The judge said that the case had exposed a shameful chapter in the administration of the Commonwealth Social Security system. The lawsuit finally brought to an end an unlawful welfare program called Robo Debt. The only problem was that the program had been running for 5 years by this time and had unlawfully collected $751 million from 381,000 people, some of them being the most vulnerable in our country.
Think about that. So they've incorrectly clawed back $750 million from Centrelink welfare recipients, many of which who probably really could not afford to part with that money. Disgusting. 380,000 people probably on the breadline forced to pay money back.
It did untold damage to citizens who in many cases had done nothing wrong. This series is a deep dive into RoboDebt, but before I get into it, it's safe to say that no one wants to take the blame.
But those opposite have the temerity, the hide, the audacity to walk in and lecture this government on a process they were intimately involved in.
It is a policy and it is a principle
Member for McMahon.
that was embraced by the Labor Party, that has been followed by this government, and Mr Speaker, where the circumstances have now presented that income averaging is not something that could be relied upon solely, then the government has made it right.
This government's tried to do what it normally does when it gets caught out, tried to say, well, Labor did it first. This is not true. They were so greedy to chase and prop up false budget surpluses, they saw vulnerable Australians and said, righto, we think we can get away with picking on the poorest and the most vulnerable in Australia, and no one will notice.
The Liberal government was
Absolute. See you next Tuesdays. Both sides. All these people blaming each other. They can stand there all pomp and circumstance in the parliamentary chambers there, pointing fingers. Oh no, you did it. Oh no, it was your fault. They don't care about the little guy. The government doesn't care about the little guy. The government doesn't care about anybody. As they said, prop up government revenue, right? To try and get that government surplus. That's all that. Listen to the language that they use. You're not people, you're dollars and cents. And I think it is fantastic that they've been caught out on this. This is quite an old story. It was a huge scandal about 5 years ago. But it caused a lot of people to end themselves, a lot of people just to have life-changing impacts based on stress and other circumstances. It's really horrible. These people standing in Parliament who have had privileged lives will never understand what it's like to really need every single dollar that you get in your bank account. Working class people trying to stretch every cent they can get, every dollar they can get, and every dollar matters. So they might say, oh, well, it's only $2,000 to pay back. That could be an absolute fortune to somebody who doesn't have $2 to rub together.
saying that it was Labor's scheme that they had continued, and Labor was blaming the Liberals. But neither side is telling the full story. The term RoboDebt has been used pretty widely, but the way I'm using it is to describe what's called the Income Compliance Program, run by Centrelink from 2016 onwards. Compliance programs have been around for ages. Different governments have rightly tried to identify and recover welfare overpayments, and for decades it was all done in a very similar way. The first step is to try and identify possible overpayments, which can then be investigated further. This is done using something called data matching.
Data matching dates back to 1990. It was established under the Data Matching Program Assistance and Tax Act 1990.
Data matching has been around for a long time, and by itself isn't an issue. Data matching is basically comparing two sources of information and seeing if there's any differences. The two sources used here is information that Centrelink holds, and then tax information held by the Australian Taxation Office, or the ATO. So as an example, if you had Jane Smith who was receiving welfare, she would be telling Centrelink how much she was earning from any employment every 2 weeks. See, welfare recipients often have obligations to report any income they receive in fortnightly blocks. Let's say that Jane was only getting a few shifts per week for the first half of the year, meaning she qualified for welfare payments. During this time, she'll be telling Centrelink how much she earned each fortnight, which is, say, $400. But then in the second half of the year, she gets lucky and finally has more shifts, so she's no longer eligible for welfare. She reports this and her welfare stops. So far, so good. Centrelink systems will show that for the relevant period of time, Jane had said that she'd earned $5,200. This is where data matching comes into play. Centrelink will take Jane's details and send it to the ATO. The ATO would then match that in their systems and tell Centrelink that Jane made $50,000 in that year. To get this figure, the ATO would be using the payment summary provided by Jane's employer. In most cases, this information will be a lump sum for the full financial year. Centrelink then uses what's called income averaging to break this up into fortnights to match the time periods of the data on its own systems.
What could go wrong? As we all know, all these systems that the government implements through these huge multi-billion-dollar projects, they aren't perfect. They've got bugs. This doesn't sound like this is a complete science here. It sounds like there's a lot of human intervention and involvement required, which means more chance for huge cock-ups. And that's just what has happened. Or there could be an issue with logic and the mathematics behind it, or the data they're sourcing. How do they know what is the actual truth, apart from the page E summary? I'm very interested to watch this further to understand how they stuff this up.
It breaks the $50,000 into 26 fortnights, with Centrelink then assuming that Jane was earning about $1,900 each and every fortnight. Comparing the period that welfare was being claimed, in this case the first half of the year, the system would show that instead of earning $5,200 as she had reported, she may have earned $25,000 and therefore wasn't eligible to receive welfare payments. This isn't accurate, but the system has flagged a potential overpayment that would need more investigation to determine whether an actual debt exists. Many people are casual workers with different incomes every fortnight, or work for multiple employers at the same time but with irregular work throughout the year. The use of income averaging will often falsely flag these cases. Using income averaging to help detect red flags is one thing, but using it as the basis for an actual debt against someone is something totally different.
What could go wrong? Just averaging it, smoothing it over. What a joke. You can just see how they're going to stuff this up.
And this is where the problem is. Governments have been using this assumption to raise debts if they have no other information to go off. This is unlawful, something I'll go through later in this series.
So more or less making it up. More or less making huge assumptions on the periodic income of people. And then saying, well, you know what, actually, our computer says this, whether it's true or not, give us our money. And as I've showed you on that other video around the ATO scandal, around that business, that winemaking business, a couple of days ago, and go check it out, guys. I'll pin it to the end of the video if you guys want to watch that. The ATO will come down on you with absolute ruthlessness. You'll come down on you like a house of cards. You got nowhere to run, nowhere to go. They will wreck your life.
But the difference between RoboDebt and what was happening beforehand is the extent the government relied on income averaging to raise debts. Before RoboDebt existed, Centrelink would find about 300,000 possible discrepancies every year from its data matching exercise with the ATO. Out of this bunch, they would then choose the top 20,000 highest risk cases to investigate. Now, Centrelink has always first approached a welfare recipient to ask for further information during its investigation, asking people to provide payslips and other documentation that they might have. But if for whatever reason they didn't have this information or couldn't properly explain the discrepancy, Centrelink would then go to third parties like employers or banks and request the information they needed directly. This was done using Centrelink's information gathering powers. And this makes...
Just have a think about all the effort and stuff that's going in to just get a few $1,000 here and there. Isn't like it's hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Imagine the money they've spent in rolling this initiative out, in the labour that's required through the public service employees to go and have these investigations of 20,000 people. They're serious about getting their money. I would say I could see the effort that would go through if you got business owners, high income earners, investors and stuff like that who are evading the system, underreporting, fraudulating the tax system. But these people are doing it, and they're not even actually doing it. But they're throwing the whole book at them and millions of dollars and billions of dollars of resources to claw back money from a high volume of people for low dollar values. They only need their tax revenue.
Makes sense. Centrelink, in trying to see if there's a real debt, would actually be investigating and finding information to support its assumptions. As a last resort, where information couldn't be found, a debt would be raised using the income averaging assumption. Centrelink's operational guidelines said that this was only to be used if every possible means of obtaining the actual income information had been attempted. But even as a last resort, this still happened quite a bit. A sample check of older debts from 2009 and 2011 showed that this last resort had been used about 20% of the time. Remember, this is the assumption that we now know is unlawful. Because of how easily the debt figure could be wrong, even using this assumption as a last resort was the wrong thing to do. And it looks like it's been happening for decades. People may have had incorrect debts raised against them prior to Robo Debt coming into play. The coalition, desperate not to take the blame for the Robo Debt disaster, has used this fact to try and distort the truth.
The use of averaged income data started 26 years ago. This side didn't invent it. Indeed, there's no one in this house that invented it. It was in...
Look at this. Look how much they're just doing the matrix here, just dodging accountability. How about we just solve the problem? Fix the problem. Stop trying to evade. Absolute slimy snake oil merchants. I don't trust politicians. Absolute self-interested liars. The whole lot of them. They're not there for you.
Invented 26 years ago, but it's this government that has put a stop to it.
That's Liberal MP Stuart Robert, the responsible minister for Centrelink at key points in time. What he's referring to is a Centrelink letter he dug up from 1994, which tells a welfare recipient that income averaging of ATO information could be used as the basis for a debt. And this is all part of a desperate attempt to convince us that the coalition just continued what was already happening before. So the question is, when exactly did Robo Debt start? If you listen to the coalition, they keep saying that Labor started it.
They come up with it. These people, these hypocrites, these people who have the audacity to preach integrity from the den of corruption, come in here and tell us that it is all our fault and we should...
They're all corrupt in one way or another. Isn't that they're pointing fingers and saying, "Oh, they're corrupt. We're the virtuous ones." This is an interesting video just to watch these politicians, just how slimy they are. No one's taking accountability.
Hang our heads in shame when they actually come up with it. It was a scheme that existed under Labor. It was a scheme that existed under the coalition, and it is a scheme that we are now doing away with.
And let me remind the House exactly why the member for Maribyrnong just scarpered out of here like a little boy who's just wet his trousers. And that's because the 29th of July 2011, a media release from the member for Maribyrnong and the member for Sydney, both of them together. Let's read the media release, shall we? And let's come to understand exactly where online compliance and data matching came from.
Have a listen to these guys. It's like a soap opera.
29th of July or June 2011. Current income compliance program started on the 29th of June 2011 and has continued from that day.
What he's trying to say is that this press release from 2011 proved that the Labor government started RoboDebt when Julia Gillard was Prime Minister. Unfortunately for the coalition, that's not the case. Instead, the press release talks about those who are identified as having debts and who haven't made repayment arrangements with Centrelink may have their tax refunds garnished when they lodge their income tax return.
That to me is a huge overreach. So hang on, you're just going to take people's money out of their bank accounts, or you're going to take chunks of their income straight before they receive it from their employer, when you don't even know if it's right or not. It's stealing. That is theft. I wonder if did anyone go to jail for this? Ruining people's lives, stuffing with people's ability to look after themselves. It honestly does make me feel sick. Just the amount of power that is brandished without a lot of controls around it. How do you stuff this up? How do you roll this process out without being 100% sure, 150% sure that it's right? Not just averaging and filling in the gaps and then just pinging people for debts they don't owe. Absolute monkey work.
In other words, it's a way for the government to recover money from people with already existing debts. It's got nothing to do with how those debts have been raised in the first place, and nothing to do with RoboDebt. So let's be clear with when RoboDebt started. In 2015, then Minister for Social Services Scott Morrison laid the groundwork by announcing an upgrade to Centrelink's IT systems. He said this would allow it to crack down on welfare cheats. In June 2016, the coalition government under Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull released a policy document called the Better Management of the Social Welfare System. This, and the press conferences that went with it, claimed that there was $3.5 billion of welfare debt waiting to be recovered.
There is some $3.5 billion in debts which are out there in the welfare system.
The government wanted to help its budget by clawing back a huge amount of money through this scheme. From 2016, an online...
It's all about money. It's all about the dollars. It's all about the income. Claw back the money. Steal money. Take pride out of people's hands. We need to fix this budget, guys. Yeah, don't worry about actually really tightening the purse strings, so to speak. No. Let's just pull it out of people. It's what they're doing anyway. They're fighting taxes, etc. But this is egregious abuse of power. Egregious.
The online system was developed, and some big changes were made with Centrelink's processes. To claw back billions of dollars from the community, the coalition massively expanded how many reviews would be done, sometimes going back many years. While previously there were about 20,000 reviews a year, under RoboDebt this would increase to 20,000 a week. But more importantly, RoboDebt changed the way investigations of potential overpayments were handled. All this extra investigation would have been really time-consuming for Centrelink staff. So instead, what the coalition did was to shift the onus of proof completely onto the welfare recipient being investigated. From 2016, Centrelink began sending out letters to current and former welfare recipients for discrepancies dating back to 2010. These letters would require the person to log into an online portal and provide evidence that the ATO income averaged information was incorrect.
And let me guess, they would have made it incredibly hard for people to even dig up the information they're asking for, pay slips from jobs from 15 or 20 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever it was. Who has that on hand? What average person has that all filed, ready to go in PDF files and everything, sitting on their computer? No one. What about people who are below the breadline? Probably people who aren't working in an office environment, probably working skilled and manual labour jobs, who may not be very good with technology. I can tell you now, say my mother, for instance, if she needed to do this, she'd have a nervous breakdown over it. How hard and how stressful it would be to try and clear a name of something that was wrong in the first place. Absolute mugs.
If they couldn't prove that, then a debt would be raised based on this flawed assumption. 20% of the time, the recipient was able to find evidence to show that there was no debt, meaning the assumption had been wrong. But 4 out of 5 recipients potentially weren't able to provide the needed evidence. And unlike before, Centrelink were no longer using their powers to ask employers and other third parties for the information they needed, even when recipients were having a hard time getting this information themselves. In 2017, when the Commonwealth Ombudsman...
That's what I'm saying. Make it as hard as possible for people to prove them that they're not guilty when assumed guilty of fraud, to the point where you're just going to charge them anyway. Because they can't give you all that information that you're asking for.
Was investigating numerous complaints coming out of RoboDebt. They had this real-life example which showed why the system was so bad. They've called the person H to protect their identity. H received a letter from Centrelink saying that data matching with the ATO had revealed a potential overpayment from years before. When H didn't respond to that letter in time, she was hit with a debt for $5,800. Centrelink was saying that the ATO information showed she had been working for a business for the full year, and so they had used the income averaging assumption and deemed her ineligible for the welfare she had received. In reality, she had stopped working for that business halfway through the tax year when she'd relocated. It was at this point that she had applied and been receiving unemployment benefits until she found her next job. She had already told Centrelink this at the time, fulfilling her reporting obligations. But now, years later, Centrelink put the onus on H to get evidence that she didn't owe the debt, and forced her to try and get payslips from the business. She wasn't able to, because the business had changed ownership multiple times since she had worked there.
Exactly right, that's what I'm saying. Complete pack of a-holes. Whose idea was this? This is done on purpose. Make it as hard as possible for people to prove it. And if they can't, well, bang, they cop the debt. Regardless if it's right or wrong, most cases wrong. Even if it's only 20%, I'd argue, I think it would have to be way more than that. How many people, as I said, are not going to be literate with computers, technology, are going to be able to do this process in a quick amount of time?
The report says she asked whether Centrelink could contact her former employer directly, but was told this was her responsibility and she should complain to the ATO about the wrong information provided by her employer. After months of applying for Centrelink to review the case again and again, it was finally manually reassessed and her debt was reduced to zero. What's worse is that Centrelink had already validated her employment status back in 2010 and had that on her file. See, before
Okay, so hang on. So she'd been compliant with the whole process, and unless she was going to keep harassing them, they were going to ping her for the debt. So either that's absolute corruption at worst, or blatant stupidity at the best. How can some people be working in these departments that can be pressing buttons on a computer that can really stuff somebody's life up? They realised they'd stuffed up. Someone called them out, and they've had to do this manual review and make it zero. It should be a manual review of everything and sign off, especially if it's going to impact people's lives. Computer systems are only as good as the information that's going in, and if shit is going in, shit is coming out. Absolute debacle.
A Centrelink officer doing the old manual investigation would have been checking all of these things and would have used Centrelink's information gathering powers to contact the business for information if they needed it. Instead, the false assumptions were used by themselves to raise a debt that didn't even exist. A lot of people had similar issues. Those hit with RoboDebt notices were sometimes unable to get payslips and other information for a whole bunch of reasons. Businesses they worked for may no longer exist, or may not have kept that information. I can't imagine how stressful it would be for people barely making ends meet to then have a debt notice saying they owe thousands of dollars to the government. Safe to say, things weren't going well with RoboDebt. And yet, the coalition has been pretending that nothing in the method has changed, and media outlets sympathetic to them have been running with that lie. Listen to Alan Tudge in this interview. He was the Minister for Human Services as RoboDebt was being rolled out.
Overall, the system is working as planned.
Working as planned, yeah. Extorting money out of people who can't defend themselves. Well, if you've got a at best 80% accuracy rate, that's not very good when you're effing with people's lives. 20,000 a week. So what's 20% of that? 4,000 people a week are getting shafted through your process at the absolute best case. I dare think it would be more than that. And these people can say it's working as intended. Things should have been shut down, should have never gotten up in the first place.
In relation to the system itself, how different is it to what the ALP did when they were in power?
So effectively, the methodology is exactly the same.
See, what I don't get, if you'd allow me just to make this observation, Alan, with great respect, is that what you're trying to do, I think, is sensible, fair, and what should be done. What the other mob are saying is reckless. Now, you inherited a hell of an economic disaster from the former 3 PMs, Rudd, Gillard, Rudd. And what this is to me, in my mind, as someone that wants to see you fix the budget, is the other side almost sabotaging your efforts to try and get some money back. But they never get bloody well called out on it. It's just so frustrating.
Even Centrelink itself has been
What a absolute horrible take.
pretending like nothing major has changed. In one of their submissions to a Senate inquiry, they said fundamental elements of the department's approach to administering income compliance reviews have not changed. But that's just not true. The Commonwealth Ombudsman's report in 2017 said that while data matching remained the same, the way potential overpayments were investigated had in fact changed. The Law Council of Australia, the peak legal body in the country, also disputed Centrelink's claim in their 2019 Senate inquiry submission. They said there are strong indications that RoboDebt had in fact resulted in important departures from Centrelink's prior processes. There is a lot of information on this topic, but the reality is that for decades, a flawed and unlawful assumption was used to raise debts against welfare recipients as a last resort. The Coalition, when they introduced RoboDebt, made that assumption front and centre and ramped it up so that hundreds of thousands of Australians were being hit with this shameful scheme. If there are real overpayments...
Absolute. See you next Tuesdays. Oh, you're doing 20,000 a year. Hey, we need a bit more money. How much money is in this for us? Oh, that sounds all right. Let's up it by 52 times. Yeah, let's do 20,000 a week. What could go wrong? We need those billions of dollars, guys. We need to get that surplus going. Nincompoops. And that is me being very kind. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. Once again, I thought this was a very good video by Knights in Shining Armor that explains it. There are other videos out there to go into more detail about it. So if you want to hear about that, put it in the comments. If you also have a topic idea for me, put it in the comments or send me an email at thegmanshow@gmail.com. You can get the exact email address off my channel page in the information section. Thank you very much.